Here we go. The premise of burncycle is that once upon a time, humans created sentient robots. How fantastic for us. Then we proceeded to die, the humans, and were wiped out because, humans are idiots, and only the robots remained, and then the robots, through the goodness of their heart, were like, hey, maybe we should revive the humans, because we're super sentient, we know everything, we're basically better than them, but they created us, so let's revive them and recreate their race. And you know what we should do? We should instill in their DNA some of the leadership qualities that they used to have. That seems to make sense. And then they did that. And then they realized that the reason humans went extinct in the first place was because of the choices of these leaders, who proceeded to then enslave the robots, take away their important code that allows them to function autonomously, and that is where our story begins. That's the premise of the game. You are now these robots who must steal the remnants of your code back from these idiot human corporations so that you retain all of your powers once and for all and can be the rightful top dog of the world, I assume. But since the humans have basically collared you, you have to do it stealthily. You can't do it in an all-out attack. You have to infiltrate the various corporations and take back what is rightfully yours. This is Burncycle. I've already talked too long about the theme, but if that interests you, stay tuned because I'm going to tell you how to play, who this game is really for, and whether or not it might be right for you. If you're here just wondering, is this a good game? Yes, it's a good game, but it may not be good for you. So let's get into the nitty-gritty, the basic overview. Burncycle can play 1 to 4 players, and each of these players will choose a robot. This is the robot that you are using. This is the robot that is breaking free of the humans' rule, and this is the robot that is your character. But in addition to the robot's team, there will always be one additional robot called the command module, and this command module is the reason why you robots can rebel. It needs to stay with you because it's running this program called the Burncycle, which allows you to rebel against the corporations. They've instilled that you can only do certain things, and it's the Burncycle that allows you to alter the code so that you can do better things, more sneaky things. So you'll choose your character, you'll choose a character for the Burncycle. Each character has a front and a back to them. One is the player powers and the other is the Burncycle. The Burncycle basically just has one general power that the group can use. And then you will choose a scenario from one of the 24 scenarios in the base game. There will be 3 corporations to infiltrate. That means 3 different floor plans that you can possibly attack. And then 8 scenarios in each of these corporations that will vary the complexity of the game and vary the length of the game as well. Because sometimes you only want to play 1 floor, and sometimes you want to have an epic heist adventure of 3 floors. And one of the interesting things about the game right off the bat is that each robot has a designated amount of power. And this power represents a whole bunch of things. It represents your life force. It represents the amount of abilities that you can unlock at the beginning of the game. It represents how many dice you get to add to your common pool. Because when you're attempting to do something, you're going to choose a number of dice, roll them, and hope you get enough value so that you can do the thing that you need to do. There's a little bit of a push your luck mechanic here because you want to just scrape by, but you also don't want to waste your action. So once you choose your scenario, you'll know what you have to do, how many floors you have to accomplish, and usually the scenarios will involve go to a certain place, do a thing, then get to a different place and proceed to the next area. Those things can be hacking into a system, getting equipment for yourself, anything bot and spy related. And the main actions you can do on the board revolve around moving, hacking into systems, unlocking doors, and punching guards in the head if you get caught. Now this is a stealth game. This is billed as a stealth game. This is not a game where you're going to run around the map and just bash each and every guard. Although I did that in my last game, and it was very satisfying. It's not designed to be that, though. It's designed for you to have a limited amount of actions and a limited amount of time before the corporation catches on to you. Eventually, you will be discovered in this game, and your hacking will run out, and hopefully you've achieved your goals by then. So most of the game takes place on this neoprene upon neoprene upon neoprene board that you've assembled, where you'll move your character around, punch through walls, hack into systems, move up and down floors. But then there's also an additional side game that is played as your IP runs around the opposing team's system and they try to block you off. We'll talk more about that network IP aspect in a second. Or maybe we will now. Basically, once you are done all your turns, you will then take the same number of actions over on the network area, and depending upon what chips are in your burn cycle, you get to move along the network in various ways. Now, the main way you will do your actions is through the burn cycle. The burn cycle will have a limited number of open spots depending upon the command module, what they are currently running, how much power they've diverted into the burn cycle to give you more slots open. And these are basically the amount of actions that you get to take before the corporation gets to take a turn. So even if you're playing with multiple people or solo, one of you will take all of your actions, then do your network actions, and then the corporation will move all around the board and automate the guards, and they'll search for you, etc., etc., etc. In a very specific number of ways that is detailed in both the Learn to Play rulebook and the Rules Reference rulebook. This is a big game. In reference to the burn cycle, you are only allowed to take the number of actions that are currently active on the burn cycle. And yet, at the end of everyone's turn, a dice will be rolled and a chip on the burn cycle will degrade. So unless you replace that chip with something in your reserve, you will not be able to take that action. You can reboot the burn cycle, but then of course, the threat will increase. And if the threat increases all the way to the end of this track, you lose the game. For those of you who are familiar with dungeon crawling, this may feel similar, but it's not quite similar because the focus is on stealth and efficiency rather than mowing down a bunch of baddies. And this is the first thing to consider if you are contemplating getting this game, is what do you like in your games? Do you like confrontation? Or do you like slowly building up your stats and waiting for that final initial blow? This is absolutely the second one. There isn't necessarily going to be a climax of the game because if you do your job right, well, you get out unseen. The enemies in this game feel difficult to defeat, and that's by design. They're supposed to, because you're not supposed to just run through the hall as this tiny little bot that you are, punching out all these hulking humans who are in their mech suits. That doesn't make any sense. You want to slip by into the corridors or strategically burst through a wall, hack into a system, and be gone before they can even get to you to investigate. That's the overview of Burn Cycle. Perhaps you can tell a little bit about the size of the game in the fact that that overview seemed overwhelming and bursting with information. Or at least it did to me, and I know how to play the dang thing. This is going to be a game that requires a significant amount of energy from you as a player if you want to get to the good stuff. And there is good stuff here. There definitely is. My favorite part of the game have to be the bot's abilities. This is from the expansion. But still, I think it's telling that one of the expansions, which I'll talk about later on if you need it, this little one called the Specialist, is just 4 extra characters. It's because the characters are fun, and the characters do feel like they play differently. I'm not quite sure if they do play differently, but at least they feel like it. You can, if you want, have all of your players play the same if you just do the sensible thing and only upgrade their dice pool, which every character can do. But every character also has a unique ability that is fun and gets me really excited to play the game and, most importantly, keep playing the game. My most recent game I played as this character Memory, who has their own little special bot called Joan the Drone that they can send out and survey things and sweep the area and figure out what's in every room so that you can easily plan your routes and avoid the guards. You scope out which rooms have guards and you just avoid those rooms so you don't get into a confrontation. Another character I played was Interface, whose ability is that they can disguise themselves as a security guard. When the security guards activate, they also activate and they get to walk around the room. If somebody needs to investigate something, Interface can go, don't worry, I'll check it out, and go and investigate the noise and say, nothing to see here, and the guards will be convinced. This is a cool character. Access is specifically designed to go to every terminal because the bonuses at the terminal for hacking into the network are so huge. There's a character named Crash who is designed for breaking through walls, as the name entails. There's a character who just has to sit and transmit and can only move the command module, because everybody can move the command module on their turn, but cannot move themselves unless they're just attaching themselves to someone walking by. They're just a little radio broadcasting, saying, oh, watch out for this thing, and helping the team in that way. The characters feel so fun and so varied, and they are the reason why I want to keep coming back to this game, because I want to see how the different characters interact. I want to see the characters go on different adventures. I don't even care necessarily about the scenarios. The scenarios, they feel slightly different, but they're not completely different to me. They kind of boil down to the same thing. Get to a place, do a thing, go to the next level. But it is the characters and the differences of the characters and how you can level up your character and how you can't level up your character in all the ways that you want to every game that make it fun and exciting to keep coming back to this game. And that's important. That is important when you pay $200 Canadian, $150 US, I believe, for this game. It might even be going up in price because prices are ever soaring depending on the time that you're watching this video. It is important to have a game that makes you want to play it again when you finish, and I think burncycle does this very well. In addition, managing your actions and managing the burn cycle is also fun. You're going to have these various chips, and you're going to be replacing them on the action track, and depending on what color the chip is, if you take a certain action, that action actually gets to be optimized, and you get to do something additional with it. So if you have a physical action, you get an extra bump to whatever you would have rolled. You get 2 movement points, or 2 punching points, as I like to call them. If you have a blue chip, this helps you hack into the keypads, which is incredibly important because you need to get into rooms to complete your objectives. And if you have the green one, well, it makes hacking into the terminals a lot more effective. And so mapping that out beforehand in terms of the order at which you're going to want these things to appear on the burn cycle, and for whom, because it's down to a random roll of a dice, which will determine which one of these no longer works on your compatriot's turn. That's also something very fun to manage. And I don't mind that each game basically plays like a escort mission in a video game, because you are all taking care of this command module. Because if the command module gets destroyed, you also lose the game. It's okay if one of you gets destroyed, because your buddy can always come and revive you and repair you using their energy, sticking their little R2-D2 prods into your circuit board and juicing you up like any Olympic heister would want to be. But you have to protect this command module, and while escort missions aren't my favorite in video games, I like how it works in this. I think there's also the potential that you just shove your command module into a corner if they're not needed for the scenario, and you just go on your merry way and don't worry about it whatsoever. But the meat of this game, which is navigating the rooms, hacking into stuff, is fun. It really is. And then you get to the network side of things. And this isn't a huge part of the game. Let's be clear. It's not a 50-50 sort of scenario, because you're not spending that much time on it. You're just spending a little extra time at the end of your turn to move your peg around this little board and try to knock their pegs back before they knock you. It's basically a slightly more advanced version of Trouble. Hey, what are you bots doing? Hacking in the mainframe! It's really not that exciting. And I think my issue with it is that it is overly complicated to upkeep for what it is. Because you see on the corporation's turn, if there are no pings in the system, they send out a ping. And then you also roll a dice for every ping on a hub. But then you also move every ping 3 moves clockwise, and then if there's no pings on any hubs, then the pings expand outwards. But if you roll a dice that adds another ping and it can't go on a hub, then it just goes one ahead, and you have to activate the one that's ahead first, and then move things out. And then when you move, you can either move up, or move to a hub, or move to the node that you chose, or the color that you chose. And if you land on a section of the ring, you get a bonus, but you can't really see the bonus because it's not printed very well, because it's printed on a neoprene mat that's unnecessary. And so then you also have to remember, okay, on level 1, you increase your own dice by 1 over on the node system, and then level 2 you can decrease the threat, and the threat is over there, not actually the other dice that's in the system. And then on level 3 you get a power, which is amazing because you really want power in this game, because you want that power to upgrade your abilities. And then on level 4 you get to do all of them, but then back to start, and you start all over again. It's just fine, and it's disappointing that it is too overly complicated, and it really, I find, detracts from the enjoyment and the fun that's happening here. But it is an integral part of the game, and I'll tell you why. This game is about stealth, and because it is about stealth, there's going to be so many points in your turn where you don't want to do anything. You've used your dice. You don't want to walk out into the hall because a guard is right there and you need to wait for the guard to pass, but you still have actions and you don't want to do anything else on your turn, but it would feel really crappy if you just didn't do anything. And that is where the network cards come in. On your turn, instead of taking an action, you can draw a network card, which basically gives you a incentive to do something over on the network board. You can only keep these cards for 1 turn. You cannot stockpile them. And you can only have 3. But the powers that they allow you to get feel good. But what feels even better is that you're not wasting an action. And I was thinking, what if we just cut that board entirely? Well, then we would cut the network deck entirely, and then there would be so many turns where you're just sitting there waiting for a guard to walk by. You don't have any dice. You're not able to hack into something or use your abilities because they all require dice or a dice check, and then you wouldn't have something to do that can progress you forward and help beef up your character. It's just a little unfortunate that what you're doing over there is so simplistic and yet so overly complicated for what it needs to be. For me now, it doesn't detract too much from the game, and I like getting the bonuses that this network board can give you. I don't know what I would replace it with, and I wouldn't cut it entirely because you need to be able to do something on your turn when you're not doing anything on your turn. But I also have found that my lack of enthusiasm for the network board has also made me not enthusiastic about any scenario that incorporates the network board as its central theme. The more time that the scenario wants me to spend on the network card, the less chance there is of me ever playing that scenario. Like, it's fine, it's just not that exciting. Whereas over here on the main board, you do get those exciting moments. I know I mentioned that you're not always going to have a climax, but in one scenario, in an expansion, and let me be clear, this isn't because it was an expansion that this scenario occurred. This could have happened in another scenario, or another climax could have happened that. Don't feel like you need to purchase this expansion just so you get those scenarios. That's a silly thing to do. But we burst through the wall. We basically called over a guard, the captain. This is when I was interface and I was in disguise. I ripped off my mask and I said, "Hey there, Captain," took a step back. My other bot moved forward with a giant hammer, smashed the captain on the head, who just happened to be like another robot, an actual robot that had kind of turned against us. Smashed him in the head, walked back through the hole that we made in the wall, and escaped to victory. It was so exciting. It was glorious. And I want more of the game to be taking place in this realm and not having to always go over and say, oh, okay, I've got 3 actions. I move here, up, and I move my little dice up 1. It just feels a bit unnecessary and not as exciting as the excitement of the main game that the main game can actually provide. So this is a tricky one in terms of recommendation for me, because if you've watched this channel before, you know that I come from a fairly budget-conscious perspective, and chip theory games are anything but budget-conscious. And that's because they take every effort to deluxify any component. If there could be any component that can be deluxified, it will be deluxified. Even these useless chips in the middle that have no point unless you're playing the rescue mode, which is a campaign mode that you can find online, where you can slowly unlock the bots, which honestly feels really cool. And then for that, you need the symbol on the back of these various corporations. These represent the corporations that you are infiltrating, and they are in the center of the network board. It's just a picture. Yet these things are still premium quality components and only add to the cost. And I don't know if this game is completely enhanced by the premium nature of it. I mean, obviously, it feels great to play. If you like neoprene, well, everything is neoprene. When you build the board, you have these tiny little neoprene rooms, a whole stack of them, that you're going to then build the board with. You have this entire bin filled with just neoprene rooms that you can arrange and create different corporations and different layouts, basically. And that's already on a neoprene mat. And your player boards are giant neoprene things with holes cut into them, like most of Chip Theory Games' player aids. Every card, waterproof, made of plastic. You have tons of dice, a whole tray of dice just for equipment that you may never draw in a game. Each bot can hold up to 2 equipment, and yet you do still have all of these dice because they add to your roll. Everything here is premium, and while I appreciate a lot of it, there is some that actually detracts from the game. I love the poker chips in this game. I think it's incredible. It's so satisfying to pick up and manipulate, and easy to clear the board and stack and put away. I love the organizational system that Chip Theory has included, even though when I turn these poker chips on their side and put them back on the shelf, sometimes this gets loose and they jump from tray to tray. It usually keeps everything nice and tight. I love that it comes with even a little card holder for all your various cards that are etched in the bottom as to what goes where. They have the names already written on them. This care towards storage and making their games as accessible as possible and easy to set up when it could be absolutely horrendous to do so and become a real bar to getting to the table. I absolutely love that, and I really appreciate that. At the same time, I just feel like it doesn't all have to be neoprene. I think this game could cut its cost in, I don't know what manufacturing is, but by a decent margin, if not everything, was a mat. These rooms could be cardboard tiles. This network board could be cardboard, and in fact might be served well by being cardboard because some of the iconography is not able to be printed on in as much quality as you might otherwise see on a cardboard, for example. The printing is good for what they're dealing with, but it's the symbols themselves, especially on row 1 and 2. I'm happy that they specify in the rulebook that it is ring 1, you get to do this thing, ring 2, you get to do this thing, because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to figure it out just by the actual printing process. And then when you have something that is so premium, it makes those little mistakes a little less easy to ignore. When you have a company that is premium, then when you see a mistake, you go, oh, well, this is annoying. For example, the security room, at least in my copy, there's no hole next to this door, and that would be fine. It's just that to mark that this door is open, you need to put a little green peg in it that should fit in nicely. And yeah, you just put it right next to it, and you say, whatever, who cares? Like, that's not the end of the world. But you notice it a little bit more because you've paid these sort of extra premium prices. Now, the neoprene, you'll have to decide on your own if you care about it or not. I know people love neoprene. I know people don't care for neoprene. That is the mandate of the company. That's not going to change. That's up to your own personal preference. But this is a game where everything deluxe is forced upon you when it doesn't necessarily have to be, and almost to a point where it does feel a little excessive at times. For example, this bag right here, its sole purpose is for you to put in 2 to 3 chips and pull them out one at a time. Whereas I've already thrown it away, or not thrown it away, but I'll probably use that bag in another situation, because when I'm rebooting the burn cycle, I'll take my 3 chips and I'll go shuffle, and I'll ask the person who I'm playing with to pick a number from 1 to 3. 1? Okay, it's this one. 2? It's this one. 3? Great, this one. It's not even a mechanic to have more than you're going to draw. You're drawing the exact number. It is strictly used as a randomization tool. And yet you have this ultra premium bag that feels like it doesn't need to be here. It also drives me up the wall that when you have so many colors to choose from and so many different dice, a very integral dice to rolling the same or almost the same color as a common dice that's going to be all over the table, whereas you could have chosen almost any other color to make this burn cycle die. Maybe make it orange. That might be more effective. Maybe just make it white, because there isn't a white die with numbers on it. It's these little things that irk you just a little bit. And in another production team, I might be strangely more forgiving about it, or less annoyed by it. But I feel like if you're putting yourself forward as the premium experience, and then you still have these details that don't feel as thought out, it's frustrating. And I think it's important to talk about those little details because this does come in at such a high price point. On the flip side, I played this game, and then I played another game which had, cardboard pieces and cardboard map tiles. And I thought to myself, wow, my hands can really feel the difference in quality. There is a noticeable difference when you are playing with premium components and when you aren't, even if you do have to get used to shuffling these plastic cards in a way that, makes them not slip out of your hands immediately. And for the most part, I really enjoy the premium elements to it, but it's important to note that just because it's premium doesn't mean there aren't going to be flaws and there aren't going to be concessions to be made. There might be less, but there still might be some. Now let's talk about the main reasons why you shouldn't get this game, and that is because it is so involved. I have probably spent more time looking through these two rule books than I have actually making decisions in the game over this review process. And perhaps that's why I now have reached a point where I want to continue to play, because I have invested so much time and I feel comfortable with the mechanics and I can play freely, not being stopped constantly by having to have my nose into the rulebook. And I want to get it back to the table, or at least that's what I think, until I get to another session and then forget how the network moves or the order of operations, and there's no room on the network card or the neoprene to print out a possible reminder. And so again, my nose goes back into the book. And if you are fine with that level of commitment, I think burncycle will be a really great, rewarding game. But I think for the average person, it might prove to be too frustrating than it's worth. This is a game where you want somebody to be like a DM and know everything and be able to move the characters around and move the guards and automate what's happening on the board so that everyone else can just focus on having a good time. And if that's not you, then you should not purchase this game, flat out. And on that end, I have played this game at the 1-player count, 2 players, and 3-player count, and I think I like it best at 2. And I think that's also, to caveat, my personal preference is that I'm not a huge solo game fan. I would rather play a video game which will automate the stuff for me. Or I think it's really because I enjoy having a game where I can do something cool, and then I can look over to my friend, and then they can do something cool and tell me about how they got to that decision. And having those moments to talk about are really provided by the bots and their different abilities, and the navigating how much power are we each going to contribute into the command module to unlock that extra burn cycle slot and unlock an extra action for the entire group. It's really quite exciting to me to see what someone else is doing, and I like that at the 2-player count. At the 3-player count, it starts to drag a little bit. It's weird, the decisions could be so quickly made, and yet you don't do a lot of them, and yet it takes a really long time to decide on what you do. Or perhaps it's just me and my personal playing style and the people who I play it with. But it feels like at 3 to 4, I don't think I'd want to play it at 4 players, although you could see all the bots going in order, and I actually can see a lot of exciting possibilities for when you scale up, because everyone has to transition to a new floor. And the fewer bots there are, the more open spaces there are to get to. The more bots there are, everyone has to get to a specific spot on the board in order to move up to the next level. And that, to me, feels really exciting, that there will be that lack of space and you'll have to negotiate it even more. But I also feel like the average person might get bored while you're playing it. So where have we landed on this game? I didn't want this review to be so long, and yet there's so much more that I could say about this game and want to say about this game. Want to critically dive in to specific moments and how they made me feel, and the possibilities here are really strong. Like I said earlier in the review, this is the type of game that makes me want to keep coming back to it when it's on the table. When it's on the shelf, I need to have the energy needed to pull it out again. But as soon as I pull it out and I start looking through these different bot abilities, I think, oh, there's something new I haven't tried. Or maybe I'll try this strategy this time. Maybe I'll infiltrate a different corporation. And most of the scenarios while they feel, you know, fairly similar, I think have enough differences to make me want to delve into them more. It's not the scenarios, it is the bots that make me want to get more and more into this game. And with that end, I also have been playing with 2 different expansions as well. We have the Specialist expansion, which adds in just 4 bots, and then we have the Bio Defend expansion, which adds in an entire new corporation. There's a new floor plan, or the floor plan's actually written in the initial book, but you get 8 new scenarios. You get a bunch more custom dice for equipment cards that you may never pull out of the deck. Also, you might expect me to say that the Specialist expansion is integral to the game, and I think it absolutely is not. I don't think either of these expansions are integral currently, because I think there is so much content and so much possibility in this box. I mean, look at this box. Look at the size of it. It's, you know, it's bigger than my arm. It is my arm. I'm part burncycle now. This review has been too lacking in jokes because I am so conflicted with it. Not conflicted in a way that I don't think it's a good game. I think it is a good game. I'm conflicted if it's a great game. And I'm conflicted if it is a good enough game for the increased price point that tends to come with chip theory games. Or a lot of games now are jacking up the prices, but it's still, is it worth it? From a gameplay perspective, from a value perspective, I think it's absolutely worth it. And that is strange for me to say, because this is a very hefty price point, and I don't often say these things, but I think the quality of game that you get here and the quality of components is unrivaled compared to probably any other game that I've played. Even with my issues with the printing and my annoyances with the color of the burncycle die and everything that I harped upon, that is their focus of the company. If you want a premium experience, this is it. Or any game by Chip Theory, I feel, at this point. That's not what I am considering when I say the question of value. The question remains of, will this get to your table or not? And for me, I don't know. When I played this with my friend Zach, he has a rating system of 1, 5, and 10. 1, not gonna play it. 5, yeah, would play it. 10, will ask to play it. And he put this as a 10. Even though we were frustrated and it took us a long time to work through this, he was like, I think it's a 10 because I want to keep returning to it. I would play another game right now. And with it on the table, that's how I feel. When it's on the shelf, I don't know if it has enough power to get me to pull it out, just based around the amount of investment that you have to do for it. Especially as a new player. Now that I know it, it feels a lot less daunting. But ultimately, I believe if you purchase or have purchased this game and you are interested in this game, there will be likely enough of a draw for you to keep getting it out off of your shelf. Maybe. It's a tricky beast, burncycle. One that I am exceptionally glad that I have played, and also so angry at how long it has taken me to access even part of its potential. For me, this gets a seal of approval, for sure. The dissatisfaction with the trussed up Game of Trouble off to the side makes it not quite enter into seal of distinction level. I still really enjoyed my time with this, and at the very least, I think is worth looking into a little bit more. I will say, though, that if you do end up getting it, I would not learn it from the tutorial, because I found the tutorial to be incredibly lacking in terms of giving me the actual tools I needed to learn the game. We played our first game through the tutorial, and it automates your first moves. And to me, that should tell me what moves I'm going to make, and should really explain to me everything that there is to this game. But there is so much to this game that the tutorial is not going to be able to touch it. You're going to do the tutorial, you're going to go home and read through the entire rulebook again, and then start to understand what the tutorial was trying to tell you. But it'll still make you miss little things. Like the tutorial tells you to put one little globe in a room to remind you to survey that room, even if it has 2 symbols, and then it doesn't tell you that when you get to that room, you want to roll the dice twice because there are 2 symbols. Just put 2 symbols in the room. Just put 2 little cubes in the room. These little things like that. It doesn't tell you that keypads can be resolved in any order. It doesn't tell you that the security can move through locked doors. And all of these little things feel very important to the strategic decisions, and I could go on, but I don't want this review to be any longer than it is. Sufficeth to say, Burncycle's a good game, which if you are willing to put in that time investment and play it over all of your other games, you will be rewarded by it. This is the type of game where I want to get all the expansions even if I know that I don't need them. This is the type of game that makes me stress thinking about playing it, and not for reasons inside of the game, but because I'm afraid I'm not getting the security pattern exactly right. But at the end of the day, this is a game that I want to return to. I just don't know how much I actually will. Anyway, hopefully you found this video helpful in describing both the possibilities and the pitfalls of burncycle. Or you know what? Even if it wasn't, hit the like button, because I spent hours with these rule books and you're still here, so reward me. That seemed a little intense. Thank you so much for watching. My name's Chris George. I don't have a catchphrase, but I've got enough neoprene here to shingle a doghouse. You win some, you lose some.